like this one. The midpoint, this shows up over and over again. You are definitely going to be tested on a question like this. So this is a little different because I am given the midpoint. That is my midpoint. I know that one endpoint is A. A is -2, -6. For this particular question, I don't know the value of my midpoint B. So we're going to let B be represented by X and Y, and those are unknown values. I don't know the value of that. However, I do know that my midpoint is equal to -4, 2. So in order to solve this question, we're going to use some algebra. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to set up the equation. -4, 2 is going to be equal to my midpoint formula. So x1 is -2. However, I don't know the value of x2. So I'm going to let x represent the value of x2 divided by 2. Raven, I hope my y coordinates. -6 plus, I don't know the value of y2. So I'm going to let that be represented by a y. Does anyone have any ideas how I can solve this? Because I don't know x and y, but how can I use... So first of all, I'm going to concentrate on my -4 because that's the x portion, the x part of my midpoint, x coordinate of my midpoint, and the equation that would help me get that number. So I'm going to let -4, set that equal to -2 plus x divided by 2. Now, what are all whole numbers always sitting on top of? A 1. So I'm going to put, since -4 is a whole number, I'm going to put a 1 there. So now I have a fraction on the left-hand side and a fraction on the right-hand side, and it's separated by an equal sign. How would I solve this type of situation? Whenever you have a fraction and a fraction separated by an equal sign. Yep. Very good. Cross multiply. So I'm going to cross multiply. So -2 plus x times 1 is going to give me -2 plus x. -4 times 2 gives me -8. And remember what you're solving for. You're solving for the x coordinate of your other midpoint. So I need to isolate my x. So I will leave x on the left-hand side and bring all the numbers over to one side. I already have a -8. When you bring -2 over to the other side, it becomes +2. So x is going to be equal to -6. So that's going to be the x coordinate of my endpoint B. Okay? We're going to do the same thing to help me solve for y, except I'm going to use the y coordinate of my midpoint and the equation that describes y coordinate of my midpoint. So 2 over 1 is going to be equal to -6 plus y divided by 2. And in order to solve this question, I'm going to cross multiply. So -6 plus y times 1 is going to give me -6 plus y. 2 times 2 is equal to 4. So we're going to do the exact same thing again. Isolate your y, so we're going to keep y on the left-hand side, and everything else is going to move over to the right-hand side. So what happens to the -6 when it moves over to the other side? Good, it becomes a +6. So that means the y coordinate of my endpoint is 10. And we can actually go back to our diagram to check this logically. -2 plus -6 gives me -8. -8 divided by 2 gives me -4, and that's the x-coordinate of my midpoint. -6 plus +10 is +4. Positive 4 divided by 2 is 2. So plug it back in to check that you have the right answer. Is everyone okay with this concept? This comes up over and over and over again, and I always see so many problems with it on the test. So make sure you know it inside and out. Okay, I'm not going to do this entire question with you. It is from your guide, unit guide, but it's a question that a lot of kids get stuck on, so I'm going to set it up with you. The point x negative 1 is 13 units from the point 311. What are the possible values of x? So first of all, let's let this be my x1, y1, and this point is going to be my x2, y2. The reason why this is a little different, I know the length of the line. The length of the line is 13 units. So now all I have to do is substitute the other values into the formula. So 13 is going to be equal to the square root of x2 is 3, x1 is x squared, y2 is 11, y1 is negative 1 squared. So the unknown that we have in this particular question is the x term. Usually the unknown is the length, but in this scenario I know the length, I don't know one of my coordinates. So I'm going to try to solve for x and use what I know about the length of the line formula in order to solve for x. Okay, so can someone plug on your calculator? What is 13? How do I get rid of a radical sign? How do I get rid of the square root of something? What is the opposite of taking the square root of something? Yep. Yes, to square it. Good. So the opposite, if the opposite of squaring, taking the square root is squaring, in order to get rid of this square root, I'm going to square both sides. When you do that, the square root disappears, and all I have on my right-hand side is 3 minus x squared plus 11 plus 1. 11 minus negative 1 is the same as 11 plus 1, which is 12 squared. And now I have 13 squared on my left-hand side. So I need some help with this calculation. What is 13 squared on your calculator? Good. And what is 12 squared? 12 squared. 144. Good. And then I have this 3 minus x squared. Now we haven't learned how to square a binomial yet. You're going to learn about that in Unit 7. But we don't need to know that concept. What we are going to do is isolate this expression. We're going to keep it on the right-hand side, and I'm going to group all my numbers together. So this 144 is going to move to the other side. So 169 minus 144 is equal to 3 minus x squared. What is 169 minus 144? Good, 25. So 25 is equal to 3 minus x squared. Almost there. I'm trying to isolate, I'm trying to solve for my x terms. So first of all, this pesky little squared sign is getting in the way. What did we say? What is the opposite of squaring something? Taking the square root. So I'm going to take the square root of both sides. The square root of 25 is plus minus 5. There's a positive and a negative situation, so that's why we write it plus minus. And now I just have 3 minus x. The squared has gone away. So to isolate the x, I'm going to move the x over to this side to make it positive. The 3 is going to remain on the right-hand side, and I'm going to bring over the plus minus 5. It's still plus minus 5 because I have both signs there. So x is going to be two possible answers. X is going to give